Within there's a lot of automotive features that have the same functionality but have different names. Everybody remembers Posi Traction from the movie, My Cousin Vinny, and they're
Right.
talking about the differences between, a 63 Tempest and a 64 Skylark, and the differences with the two stripes coming from the Posi Traction vehicle on the Tempest, and the one that Ralph Macchio's character is driving with the 64 Buick, only has the solid axle in the rear one. I mean, you remember
Brings
that,
up,
right?
yeah, and it brings up an incredibly good point because even though, you had sure grip, you had anti-spin, you had posi traction, you had these different names for the same feature, but Mona Lisa Vito described what it did. And so what it was, of course, the famous quote, uh, see, when the left tire mark goes up on the curb and the right tire mark stays flat and even, well, the 64 Skylark had a solid rear axle. So when the left tire would go up on the curb, the right tire would tilt out and ride along its edge. But that didn't happen here. The tire mark stays flat and even. This car had an independent rear suspension. So that's, yeah, the part about, but the important part was the limited slip differential.
Yeah,
So
and I mean, your Brooklyn accent is pretty close to the yachts down here in New Orleans, man. So I got to give you kudos for that.
all I
Um,
got to do is change y'all to use guys, and then and speed up a little bit.
yeah, you got a dead rigger there. But I think Marissa Tomei would be impressed. So great job. But
Yeah,
you got all kind of different you know, four-wheel drive systems that are
yeah.
out
Well, let
there.
me go back to the limited
Oh,
slip because
okay,
actually
sure.
I did the wrong thing.
All right.
So the car that made these two equal length tire marks had posi traction. You can't make these marks without posi traction, which was not available on the 64 Buick Skylark. And why not? What is posi traction? It's a limited slip differential which distributes power equally to both the right and left tires. 64 Skylark had a regular differential, which anyone who's been stuck in the mud in Alabama knows. You step on the gas, one tire spins, the other tire does nothing.
That happens in Louisiana a lot too, not just Alabama.
So the important part was, and actually she did an excellent job of how a salesperson should describe a feature. She gives the name that the manufacturer that he represents uses so that they'll recognize it in brochures on the window sticker and such. But then she goes back and gives it the generic name of limited slip differential so that they can more evenly compare it to other vehicles that have a similar feature with the generic name. But then she does the last most important step, which is she describes the benefit, which is it gives the power to both left and right tires equally, so your tire doesn't just sit and spin there in the mud. And that's the important part when you're talking about features with different names.
And you describe a feature in that depth. The salesperson, obviously has to have a good working knowledge of the functionality of these systems. There are systems. I remember Subaru when we're talking about their all-wheel drive system, and the moniker that they gave us to remember was this. It moves the power from the wheel that slips to the wheel that grips. Okay. So
Nice.
on a locking differential, you get 50% power to both wheels. The one side still might turn. It's not distributing power to that other side. Whereas on some of these systems, it shifts all the power or up to 90% of it, let's say, to that wheel where there is traction. So even
Yeah,
with these limited slip systems, you still have to know the differences with them, okay? And that's true with four-wheel drive when you lock in the front hubs, whether it be dynamically or whether it be manually, those are being done. And
yeah,
so, that being said, and it's a great point, the features, the benefits, and the advantages of these systems. Let's talk about some of the old things that we were talking about earlier. Back in the early 80s and 90s, Chrysler was, really innovative in these turbocharged systems to get better fuel economy. You yourself, you had what the Dodge Omni, you had the Shelby GLHS, correct?
Yep. Actually, it was my old man's car, but I got it later on.
Yeah. But there are a lot of different evolutions in that turbo system. Turbo 2, Turbo 3, Turbo 4. What were some of the differences in those systems way back when? And how are they evolved into the turbos in modern cars today?
Right. Well, the first Turbo One, which Chrysler put into an automobile first in 1984, the Dodge Daytona and the Chrysler Laser got it first, was simply a turbocharger attached to the intake manifold and the exhaust manifold that forced more air into the engine, so that a small four-cylinder engine could make 140 horsepower. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to remember that the 318 V8 that same year also made 140 horsepower. Heck, the 5-liter V8 in a Mustang, made 135 horsepower. So it was significant. It was a big difference by forcing the extra air into the cylinders. And when you weren't, stomping it, you get pretty good fuel mileage. I mean, not quite the fuel mileage of a regular aspirated four-cylinder, but well, to kind of illustrate the point, my mom would drive the Dodge Omni Turbo all week and get 23, 24 miles per gallon. Then my dad would drive it over the weekend and get 11.
Yeah, you have
So,
to fill it up on Monday to go get your
yeah,
mom to
exactly.
work.
It could be a pretty wide disparity, but it gave both. It gave high performance, and I mean, everyone remembers there was no Camaro Z28s getting 22, 23 miles per gallon, no matter how nicely you drove them.
Right. And that was the thing way back then. The engines, the big block engines, they had been detuned and just basically uh, they weren't very efficient, with all of that extra equipment on it. They just really sucked as far as fuel economy and performance. And so, when you look at again the performance that you guys had out of that Shelby uh, with the turbo compared to the Corvettes or Mustangs of the day, I mean, it was very impressive. And then looking at, today's turbos, and you look at, I mean, again, going back into the early 90s, we sold with Dodge. We had the Mitsubishi version and the Stealth RT 3-liter engine, turbo intercool, and you had over 300 horsepower. And it was unheard of to get 100 horsepower per liter back then. So it was
Yep.
a really big deal, and from a performance standpoint. Now, I mean, shoot, the last Buick LaCrosse I had, was 3.6 V6 with over 300 horsepower. So, and it was a normally aspirated engine. So it's not something that I mean today is kind of taken for granted, but back then, I mean, that was very impressive.
Yep. Because what they did was they added 4 valves per cylinder, which, especially in a turbocharged engine, just improves the heck out of the breathing. But at the same time, you had the Acura NSX, which was a whole world different. And that's because the
Absolutely.
Acura NSX, with its little, I think it was a 3.2 liter V6, had 4 valves per cylinder. Yes, it did not have a turbocharger back then. The newer ones did. But what it had was a new system, which is now pretty ubiquitous. Uh, let's see, I'm trying to remember what their name was for, since that's what we're doing is naming a
Mhm.
VTEC. The VTEC system, which was first introduced, well, especially to the States in the
Mhm.
Acura NSX, was a system that could actually vary the timing of the valve so that they can open sooner or open later. And in fact, the VTEC system in the Acura could open the intake valve sooner or the exhaust valve sooner or later on both of them. So it could let the engine idle real nicely and smoothly. It could give it a lot of torque when it first took off. And then as the RPMs climbed, it could advance the camshafts and let the engine make more and more horsepower.
Yeah. I mean, they use VTEC in a lot of the engines. I know the Civic has that in their performance variants that they have. So I mean that's evolved quite well over the years. You know, again, these variable valve timing engines, they got a lot of different names for them. VTEC, VVTI, you know, variable valve timing with intelligence. You know,
Yeah,
that's what Toyota uses. You know, Mitsubishi's got their MIVEC. You know, their innovative valve timing with electronic control. Nissan's got some of their own variant, but everybody's got, again, you know, nobody copyrights, you know, the names of these things. They've all got their little for these same systems. You know, they got a trademark, maybe a name like, again, everybody knows Posi Traction, but
yeah, these are trademarks because
correct, yeah,
on a
exactly,
single name of a feature, the trademark is the most
yeah. But
appropriate
like you
way to
said,
protect.
you know, and then you know, you talk about the turbos, you know, and you see the little Mercedes with the compressor logo on the
With the
side.
K.
With the K, exactly. Okay, we got to be true to our German friends. Ford's got the EcoBoost,
Right?
you know, on their systems, and then you know, Audi and Volkswagen, they got the TSI or the TSFI systems. Uh,
TFSI, yep.
yeah, yeah.
TSI and TFSI, that's a simple distinction. On the
Hmm.
Volkswagen and Audi, TSI is turbocharged, fuel injected.
Mm.
TFSI is turbocharged and direct fuel injected, which is
Ah.
another big jump. I mean, you have all these little jumps to engines, which can improve their efficiency, improve their power and stuff,
Mm.
and direct fuel injection, which was mostly brought by Audi and first and Cadillac. In fact, the 3.6 you're talking about was one of the very first American engines to get direct fuel injection. And
Right,
what
right.
it does is instead of injecting the fuel into the intake manifold, which is real cool and can be pretty darn precise, the direct injection does it at like 30,000 psi instead of just, 40 or 50 directly into the head. And so what happens when you take 30,000 psi fuel and it decompresses into the head, there's a Bernoulli principle effect that happens because obviously the fuel isn't at 30,000 psi. Once it expands into the combustion chamber, it decompresses. And so there's a rapid drop in temperature. So that rapid drop in temperature allows you to use higher turbo boost, higher compression ratios without getting
Mhm.
detonation. Because that was the big issue, especially with the earlier turbos, like the Chrysler turbos. We'll go back to that. The original Chrysler turbo was 142 horsepower. That was in 1984 in the Chrysler Laser and the Dodge Daytona. And that was simply a turbocharger that took the exhaust gases and used it to spin a little rod that used a compressor to force more air in the engine. Now, it did have multi-point injection to help control the air better and to deal with certain issues that early turbos, like in the Corvair and Oldsmobile F88 had. Uh, but it had bad problems with pre-ignition. And so the compression ratio on that first turbo was 7.5 to 1. Now
Wow.
that compression ratio sounds like it's out of the 40s, basically. And it's because when you compress the air into the engine, you smush the air in, that raises the temperature because the air going from atmospheric pressure to double atmospheric pressure, and I don't remember the Bernoulli formula exactly. To be truthful,
It's
I
all
probably
right.
never learned it in the first place properly. But you raise the temperature of that air charge mixture significantly. So then you get the next iteration in 1986-87. Carroll Shelby first did what there was called the Turbo 2 in 86 on the Dodge Omni GLHS, which that was the car my father had. And what that did was the compressor spun up and forced the air in, but it didn't go directly into the engine. It went back up to the front of the car through a little bitty radiator that was in the GLHS was stuck on the side of the radiator, the regular radiator over to the left.
Hmm.
And so the compressed air then went through this intercooler, which was what it was called, and ambient air going over it reduced its temperature from its initial high state from being compressed down to a lower state. And you drop the temperature in the intake charge, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 degrees. And so that allowed the use of more boost. So the compression ratio was still around 7.5 to 1, but instead of using 7.5 pounds of boost, the Shelby went up to 12 pounds of boost. So it's a significant
Very
increase.
significant, certainly.
So that engine went, the original, which by this time was putting out 146 horsepower in 86 in the Turbo 1. Then it was doing 175 horsepower in the intercooled Turbo 2.
Yeah, so that was a significant increase in the horsepower. You talk about intercoolers and the intercoolers from what I remember too, and I know you and I both saw Dodge trucks in the mid 90s, when the first Dodge trucks came in with the diesel that
The
we're
Cummins,
getting from
that was a
Cummins.
game
Exactly.
changer.
Oh,
That was the first
absolutely.
of two game changers.
Well,
Be
absolutely.
interesting to see how much of a huge game changer the Ram would have been if it hadn't been preceded by the Cummins, which gave it a cult following early on.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, it
people
was a
sell
good
the
looking
heck
little
out of it.
truck regardless, but it just didn't have the popularity as, the Ford and the Chevy, and to that extent the GMC owners did at the time. And, we were talking about earlier the multi-valve systems, working at Dodge and with that trusty old 318, when they changed from the direct injection throttle body to the multi-port Magnum injection system, going from 92 to 93, it
Oh
went
yeah,
went from 153 horsepower,
170 horsepower.
to
Yep,
213 or 225. I mean, it was
225 in the
significant.
318.
Yeah,
Yep,
because we were
235
selling the
I think
custom
in
vans back
the
then, and it was a
39. Yep.
big time change in the amount of torque, the amount of horsepower, and it was just changing the fuel delivery system and the same basic block. Didn't change anything else, but the
Yep, the
efficiency
block
and
was the same, but it was often overlooked because of the change from throttle body injection to multi-point sequential fuel injection, which is
yeah,
much more precise. It often gets overlooked. The heads were completely different. If you look at
really.
the head from a throttle body 318 and a Magnum, it looks like the difference between a Buick nail head and a Hemi. I mean, the valves got humongous. And the other
Okay,
huge thing that they did was they changed the rocker arm ratio. So
okay,
the lift and the duration on the camshaft didn't change. I think the camshaft was almost basically the same, but they changed the rocker arm ratio. And so the lift in reality and the duration in reality changed a good bit. So those valves were opening earlier, they were opening higher, and they were opening a much larger valve. So those were actually the main changes that gave the Magnum all the extra power, but it wouldn't have worked without the multi-point fuel injection because, well, you remember, when your cousin had an old Roadrunner and it was pretty good, but he was being beat by GTOs and stuff, so he took it to Jake's speed shop and had them change the camshaft.
Put a racing cam in it for
Yeah,
sure.
and then suddenly that thing's going, bah, 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 bah. I mean,
Yeah,
it drivability went to crap. And so putting the large valves, the different rocker arm ratios and everything else on that engine without the multi-point fuel injection would have killed drivability. Throttle
gotcha.
body would not have been able to even it out and make it nice and smooth and idle like a kitten. So that was the whole package put together. But it's funny because the multi-point fuel injection was what was stressed, and so everyone believed that's what gave it all the power.
Oh, I
But
know. I mean,
I
to
don't
your
know if it
point,
would have gained, you know, anything more than 5, 10 horsepower if the heads hadn't been completely redesigned.
yeah,
But
they
you're
didn't
correct, the
really
block
emphasize
was
that with
exactly the
us.
same.
Yeah, I mean, I must have missed that day in training class because, like I
They
said,
didn't go over it very well.
no, they didn't. I can tell
They
you
did
that.
not. Oh, and the intake manifold also was changed quite a bit because
Oh yeah,
uh basically
Well, you just look at it when you open a hood,
Yeah,
you could see the
I hate
intake was
to
changed.
say that the carburetor intake manifold and the throttle body intake manifold were identical, but I wouldn't I wouldn't bet anyone that they could tell them apart if you laid them out next to each other. But
Yeah,
the
well,
intake manifold that came with the Magnum, now that was an intake manifold. That
well,
thing
that's what I'm
was
saying. You popped the hood on a
screaming.
92 versus the 93. It was totally different. And that's the stuff, like you said, we focused on. And just the drivability. You were talking about that, skipping and choking. I got a neighbor around the corner from me. He's got an old 64 Dodge with a 440 under the hood. And and it just when he brings it out just to get it to go a little above idle, it's just choking. Is zero drivability. He still drag races that rascal. It's not quite street legal, but you just see him doing that. But
And the
uh,
West Bank, everything's cool.
hey, look, it's cool here. The best bank. But let's go ahead and wrap up some of these crazy names that we're talking about here. Let's talk about cruise control. People forget about cruise control. I mean, that was a big deal back in the early 60s, and now it's just taken for granted. Tilt cruise, it's like ragu. It's in there. It's an ingredient that's in there. But you've got dynamic radar cruise, you got eyesight adaptive cruise, you've got active cruise. I mean, again, it's the same thing. You set the speed and it just sits there. And, I love these features simply because, it keeps the driver a lot more alert, I think, on the highway. You're not as fatigued. With the adaptive cruise controls, the one thing I don't like about that is if you're doing 70, 75 and a guy in front of you slows to 65, guess what? You're down to 65 and you don't realize it. And
Well, you should pay more attention. And if
no,
the guy in front of you slows down
yeah.
to
Th-
65, you
Then,
should slow
then I
down to
got my lane
65
control that won't
regardless.
let me shift lanes without putting a turn signal on, and it's
See,
fighting me on the
that's
wheel.
that's the
I'm,
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, all these adaptive systems, I'm turning these damn things off when I'm doing a long distance ride to Orlando. Um, but no, that's the thing. And a rental car is the main thing. I'm driving from point A to B, and it's a distance, and it's got the adapter set up in there. And I'm like, what the hell? No wonder I'm not making any time. Traffic clears and you go to reset it and it's still there at 65. It's like, no, I want to do 75, doggone it. And, you want to get lulled to sleep. To me, it's just not as functional. Yeah, when I hit the brake and I disengage, I understand that it's going to roll back to whatever the highway speed is of the car in front of me. But when I want to maneuver around it, I just hit re-engage and it brings me back up. I don't have to reset it every time. And that's the big gripe I have with it. That's all.
Oh yeah. A lot of these systems have it's always a dance on the head of the pin between control and convenience. Because I mean, like goes back to manual transmissions. Heck, I'm sure there were probably guys in the 20s going, I'll never have electric start in my vehicle. I want to know when I crank the thing that I'm cranking the thing and I can crank it the way and the speed and when I want to. No, no battery electric starter going to start my engine. So,
Yeah,
I
let them
mean,
break their wrist or arm, cranking
yeah,
that rascal when it recalls
shoulder.
on them. Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's always and the big one manual transmissions. I mean,
yeah.
they even had a well, everyone remembers the book from the 80s, I think. Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
remember it's a very popular book.
but remember one of the things in there was real women don't drive automatic.
Hmm. Well,
And but
you know
it
what?
was
You're
funny because
right.
the corollary was that one of the real men are confident enough in their masculinity to let their transmissions shift themselves. So it was kind of funny.
Boy, boy, boy. You know, let me tell you something. There's a lot of young ladies that are turning wrenches right now in
Yep.
dealerships that never would have gotten that opportunity 30, 40 years ago. I guarantee you they know how to shift an automobile if it's available.
I don't know. I mean,
Oh, I know a
I've
lot of them
known
that can. I know a lot of them that can. Uh,
I've known many men mechanics who, well, not many, but there are male mechanics who can't shift a manual transmission.
well,
Oh man, yeah. If you're saying mechanic, no. I've unfortunately I've seen way too many valets that couldn't drive a manual, uh,
guaranteed. It's
and
a
there've been porters, and I'm going, you're a valet, you're a porter, you need to know how to drive a stick shift,
yeah, it's a Millennium theft device. It's this 5-speed
right? And I mean,
theft control system for Millennial.
and a
Um,
lot of these things, actually did help ladies get into driving. I mean,
oh, sure.
there were extremely limited numbers of female drivers before the electric start.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, you know, just the times, okay? 100 years ago when Henry Ford introduced the Model T, it's totally different times. I mean, women's suffrage didn't go into effect till what, 1922, 24? All right, so women, weren't given the same opportunity that men were way back when. So, the 60s
No,
and the 70s, the liberations and the women's movements, again, getting out of the politics of it, just the dynamics of availability. A lot of cars up until recently were available with a manual shift. I can tell you, my wife, when we first met in high school, she was driving a Ford Maverick, and her dad was telling me he'd had to put a new clutch in that damn thing almost every other week because she was
oh,
burning it up. Okay.
I had to put a
And
clutch in my Cobalt,
yeah,
but that was because of my son. My daughter picked up
yeah,
manual right away. She had no problem.
yeah. I think it was just more just coordination and stuff, and she didn't care, I guess, at the time, being 17, 18 years old. But
Yeah, exactly.
maybe
That wasn't a female thing at all. That was just
no, that was just it was a Maverick. I mean,
that was
everybody
just a
threw
young
up the
person
clutch.
thing. Period.
But it was also a three on a tree. It wasn't a stick shift too, so that was a little bit tougher to shift
Yeah,
than
the operation of the shifter, but
yeah,
I
it was
wouldn't
it
think that that
wasn't
would
it
affect
wasn't
how good you were on the clutch, though. But
no,
I
no, but
guess
I'm just
the
saying the
fact that it's a little
coordination.
harder to figure it out might have,
I did,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. I just like I said, like I said, it's just a joke. Every time we see an old Maverick on the road, which is rare, it's like, oh, you remember you that? Your daddy told me burn up a clutch. But anyway, long and short of that.
Oh yeah,
All right. Well,
the
let's go
cars.
ahead. Yeah, yeah. We go ahead and wrap this particular one up. And
We were talking about cruise control, and the thing is, yeah, the original cruise control, which didn't take into account other cars, you know, we take it for granted that it was always called cruise control. But the original one, which was implemented first by Chrysler, was called Autopilot. And then it had all sorts of different names, Control-Matic, Speedostat. And so, but now what we were talking about earlier was adaptive cruise control, which like cruise control, adaptive cruise control is the generic uh, name in the industry, which everyone understands.
yeah,
But that's not what a lot of companies use.
yeah. And the adaptive part of it is there's radar that gives you the distances between your car and another, and you can set some of those distances manually where it'll apply a brake automatically to slow you down.
Some of them are radar. Some of them actually use video
So,
cameras.
okay, yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
like
like
I
you
said, the
have
more
Mercedes
premium,
Benz. Yeah, Mercedes Benz calls theirs Distronic,
yes,
and Toyota call and Lexus call theirs dynamic radar cruise control.
yeah,
Those use actual radar systems, but the
yeah,
Subaru system uses a set of binocular video cameras set up high in the windshield. So binocular meaning there's two cameras, because with one
right.
camera you can't tell the distance,
No, no, you can't
but
get the depth.
because there's two cameras, it can use the difference in parallax, and it can actually determine the distance quite accurately that way.
Mhm.
That's the same system that Tesla uses also. Tesla, for some reason, shies away from radar, especially the mic the small band radars, which are
Hmm.
being used for some of the super pilots, not super pilot, for some of the super advanced automated driving.
Yeah, so the main crust about all this discussion is, there's a lot of similar features that are on everybody's vehicle. They've got, maybe a little bit different way they're doing. Like we're talking about cameras versus, radar, but they serve the same function. And if the salesperson just doesn't know to answer that question, overcome that objection. Does yours have it? Does because the other guy's does? That really puts him at a disadvantage, and that's really where Advanta-STAR can come in and help, because we go to the details and tell them, okay, here's the system, here's how it works, here's what your manufacturer OEM calls it, this is what theirs calls it, and so there's no, ambiguity. There's no uncertainty when you're sitting there. And as a salesperson, you've got to be confident when you're delivering, the answers to that customer. And the resource that we provide through Advanta-STAR can give you the confidence to, say, hey, look, that's a feature that not only that they have, but actually it originated on our product line. So I guarantee it, to your point with, and you were talking earlier, some of these things that were available on Chryslers back in the 50s and some of these turbos that were available in the early 80s. A lot of people wouldn't give credit or any kind of recognition that that's how some of these systems have evolved. I mean, I think Mercedes-Benz was the first ones to do through Bosch, the anti-lock braking systems, the ABS systems that we all know about today. Uh,
Actually, that's an interesting thing there because uh, now to be completely perfectly accurate, the Jensen Interceptor was the first vehicle to have modern four-wheel anti-lock brakes.
You
But
know, and everybody's forgotten about a Jensen Interceptor since they went out of business so many years ago. I remember the
but
car. It's mid
but
70s.
Mercedes
Great.
was not the first mainstream manufacturer to offer it.
Yeah.
In fact, Chrysler offered SureBrake in 1972 as a $518 option on the Chrysler Imperial. And it was a four-wheel system. It had three sensors, and it could modulate the brake force at all four wheels. It had an accumulator pump, so it could put the pressure back, and it was controlled by an electronic system. It was a completely modern anti-lock brake system in 72, several years before ABS was put in the Mercedes, uh, which, to give Mercedes credit, it was standard on the S-Class when it came out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. A lot of these little tidbits, that you come up with, I'm amazed. I mean, I know that you were a Chrysler file, if you will, from your days early on in the industry. And I know we've talked in other conversations, yeah, about your grandfather in the business. I mean, was this, I know you mentioned he worked for Chevrolet, but did he also, have a history with Chrysler, or you just,
nope,
were just
just
enamored
Buick
with
and
their, yeah, you've
yeah,
just
just
been
Buick and
enamored with their
Chevrolet.
history. Yeah. You know,
Oh, I'm enamored with General Motors history. Ford is my major Achilles heel.
mm,
I couldn't tell you the difference between a Torino and a Fairlane and a 500 almost at all. I mean,
yeah.
I,
No, like I said, growing up in the 60s, I love the different makes and models. And, like you said, some of the vehicles we were talking earlier, you'd see a different set of tail lights, and that was one model year to the other. Not a whole lot of sheet metal changed, not like today, where
oh
you'll
yeah.
go multi years where you can barely tell the difference between, cars over a 3 to 5 year range.
Well, that's
Uh,
why they started putting the VIN number visible at the windshield.
Yeah, yeah. But it was fun to, see the differences for each of the makes. Of course, there's so many different models today than there were back
Yeah,
then, but it
I can
was,
still do the first generation Camaros, and I can still do the Tri Five Chevys.
oh
Just
yeah.
like that. I mean, it's the Camaro, the ones with the wind wings. That's a '67. That's all you need to see. If it
Mhm.
doesn't have wind wings, it's not a '67.
The wind.
Then yeah,
That's
then
for
the
the cigarette
'68.
smokers, man. Come on,
Oh
that's
yeah, that gives you good ventilation, man. Then the 68 still has the tail light and the grills from the 67, but there's no wind wings
That,
and it has side marker lights.
yeah, that was
Yep.
68 was the first
Yep.
year that went into federal law.
Yep. 69 have the meaner looking tail lights. It
Hmm.
lost the nice smooth round rectangular, and it's got like edgier rectangular tail lights. And I believe the side marker lights went from round to rectangular,
Yeah. It got a
and
little beef
then
sheet metal
different
on it
grill.
for 69.
Yeah,
And
different grill.
then they came up with the all new body style mid-year
70 and a half. Yeah.
1970 and a half. Exactly.
Looked like a Ferrari. I mean, everyone was amazed. Then the Chevrolet Vega came out looking exactly the same, which probably made some early Camaro buyers confused.
Yeah, I saw it. Somebody did a retro. They were talking about this in 71 when a Vega, the Pinto, and the Gremlin came out. That was the import fighters, from the domestics. And I mean, the Vega, oh my gosh. And, just rust bucket. I mean,
Yep.
absolute
I've
zero.
heard people defend its aluminum sleeveless engine in later years.
Well, I can remember going into a local Chevy retailer and oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but was it a Cosworth engine?
Oh
And
yeah, the Cosworth Vega. That was a crazy thing. It was like
it was all black with the gold trim and it
more
had,
expensive than a Corvette
yeah,
and half
exactly,
the
exactly.
horsepower.
Yeah, it
But it
was
had
nuts.
a double overhead cam
Yep,
cylinder head.
yep, you
Now,
sure did.
people people don't realize the Cosworth Vega had a double overhead cam cylinder head. It was still only two valves per cylinder.
Yeah. But
People
it was,
automatically think, oh, double overhead cam. So that thing had four. Nope, did not have four valves per cylinder. The tooling to make heads like that uh, wasn't really present, especially not for a mass producer of any type.
yeah,
And so, but like the Hemi, which of course was a pushrod engine, always has been, I guess always will be. The by staggering the valves and putting them on opposite sides, you could make them a lot bigger. And so the Cosworth Vega, although it only had two valves per cylinder, they were much larger, and that was the advantage.
yeah. I said it was just like you said, more than a friggin' Corvette of the
Yep,
day. And
more
it's
than a
like, are you
Corvette.
kidding me?
Huge collector's items.
Absolutely, and they're worth a
I don't
fortune
know
today too.
who was thinking what,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Somebody.
and I mean the Corvette was going down in horsepower at the time, but it definitely hadn't gone all the way down
No, I
yet.
mean
So
72. They were still doing. They hadn't put all of their pollution control garbage on it just yet.
they had a
But
big
they
block, so it
started
made
on.
up for some of it.
Yeah, but when they wound up going, I think 75 is when they went to unleaded gas in all the vehicles. And that's when they
I
really
believe, yeah.
retarded everything on the vehicles. And it just, like I said, a 350 and a 74 versus a 350 and a 75, totally different specs and performance. Um, you know, they,
Compression ratios had to drop.
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And then
Uh,
the early catalytic converters were not very flow friendly. I mean, it wasn't
no,
like having like a flow master on the back of your car or a glass pack. That
yeah.
thing jammed you. In fact, funny related story. We had an 81 Dodge Charger 2.2, which is which is a vehicle that raises lots of eyebrows in every direction. But one of the things about the Charger didn't have a muffler.
In what model year?
81 Dodge Charger 2.2, the
Oh,
special performance version, did not
okay.
have a muffler. It depended entirely on the catalytic converter and a, a small resonator. No muffler. You'd lift off the throttle real suddenly and it would pop and crackle.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
great fun. I mean, uh, by today's standards, it would be slower than a Prius with its battery disconnected and one cylinder off. But for the
Yeah.
day, it was pretty jumpy and fun, and it handled well. And like I
Mm.
said, nothing could beat the fun of going around a corner, lifting up the throttle, and having go. Plop, 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 plop.
It's brings me to, back in the early 90s when you and I were selling together. Um, the Dodge Spirit RT, the engine that they had in there, wasn't that a Yamaha
Uh,
engine in that rascal?
no, you're thinking of the Ford Taurus SHO.
That's right. That's right. That was a
Yeah,
Yamaha engine.
yeah, the Taurus SHO. It's funny. They always had a Yamaha engine. The first ones were V6s with double overhead cams, but later on they did the tiniest little V8. It was crazy.
Hmm.
Uh, well,
Let's
I'm
talk.
sorry, I shouldn't say always because later on the Taurus SHOs got the EcoBoost Ford V6.
Yeah.
But
But
so the
the
Spirit RT, uh, what that was it was a Chrysler 2.2 turbo. That's all it was, but it used a Lotus 4 valve per cylinder head. So the
okay.
head, just like the Cosworth Vega, was a Cosworth head, and who knows, maybe they thought of that. Although they did a lot better job with power because that car, well,
That thing could smoke.
it was the fastest sedan built that
No
year.
doubt.
Period. I mean, AMGs, BMW M's, whatever. Nope.
No,
That
I
car was the
guarantee you. Somebody
fastest
said,
sedan built that year.
I went from a Chevy store selling Corvettes, and they had one on the showroom floor. And they said, "Here, go out, go out on Veterans Highway and drive this rascal." Let me tell you what, just an impressive, performance. I mean, it scared the hell out of me, but it didn't have quite the, the suspension or the, braking capacity that the Corvettes did.
No, yeah, it was decent.
It was
See,
decent, but
the
yeah,
cool
it's
part about the Shelby GLHS was it had everything.
yeah,
Similar to my Cobalt SS. I mean, it's got 300 horsepower, but it also has Brembo brakes and good shocks and everything. Now the Spirit was not like a road runner. The Spirit wasn't like, oh, I got up to 100, now I'm dead. I can't turn or brake. But you're right, it wasn't as super excellent in the braking and handling as it
no.
was in the engine.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you and it really helps out.